This is my original story, written from imagination alone. It is not based on any book, movie, or real event. What you are about to hear is a fictional tale, slow, mysterious, and quietly dangerous, mixed with moments of strange beauty and unexpected emotion. I never planned to be part of their world. I never even knew it existed. One wrong turn, one silent door that should not have been opened, and I found myself standing somewhere I did not belong. The air felt different here, heavy, watching, as if the place itself was aware of me. This is not a fast story, it unfolds carefully, step by step, like a secret being whispered instead of shouted. It's a story about being out of place, about curiosity, fighting fear, and about what happened when two worlds brush against each other in the dark. There is tension here, and mystery, and a quiet sense that every small choice matters more than it seems. You won't hear screams or chows. What you will feel instead is unease. The kind that settles in your chest when you realize you are surrounded by strangers who don't think like you, don't live like you, and may not even see you as the same kind of being. And yet, in the middle of that vampire silence, something unexpected happens, something that changed the night forever. This is how it began. The moment I stepped inside and realized I had accidentally walked into a vampire wedding.
It started as one of those harmless mistakes that only feel funny in hindsight, like waving back at someone who wasn't waving at you or stepping into the wrong Uber and pretending you meant to. Except this mistake had teeth. I had been invited to a wedding reception on the edge of the city, the kind of place couples chose when they wanted heritage without paying true heritage prices. A restored manor house refitted into an event hall, all wrought iron gates and gravel drives, perched beyond the last honest street lamp. The invitation I received, forwarded from a co-worker who couldn't go and begged me to represent the department, had a venue name I recognized or thought I did. Something like Ashgrove Hall. Something like that. So I drove out after sunset in my modern black suit, tie too tight, collar itching, rehearsing polite smiles and safe small talk. I told myself I'd stay for an hour, deliver congratulations to a couple I'd never met, eat something decent, and vanish before anyone asked me to dance. The GPS led me farther than I expected, through thinning neighborhoods into a stretch of road lined with skeletal trees. The sky was a lid of bruised purple, the moon a pale coin blurred by drifting clouds. My headlights cut through mist that thickened as if the night itself was exhaling. When the navigation voice said, "You have arrived," I saw no charming manor, no bright reception lighting, no cheerful cluster of cars. Instead, towering iron gates loomed ahead, black and ornate, more cathedral than country hall. Beyond them, a long drive vanished into fog, and somewhere deeper back, a building rose in shadow, angular and severe, its roofline like a crown of stone thorns. My first thought was that the venue had gone all in on Gothic aesthetic. My second thought was that the venue name on the gate wasn't Ashgrove. It was something else entirely. The letters were engraved in a style that looked older than the road, older than the state, older than the idea of wedding venues as a business model. Valancourt. A cold pinch of doubt tightened behind my ribs. I checked my phone. No service. Naturally. I sat there in the car, hands on the wheel, listening to the engine tick down, hearing my own breath too loud in the sealed cabin. And then, as if the night had been waiting for my attention, the gates began to open. Not with a motor's whine. Not with a human's effort. They opened slowly, smoothly, as if pulled by invisible hands. I didn't tell myself to leave. I should have. But my brain searched for the rational explanation, the normal one, the one that wouldn't require admitting I was afraid. Maybe the staff saw me and triggered the entrance. Maybe the venue had motion sensors. Maybe this was just expensive theatrics. So I drove forward. The gravel drive crunched under my tires like bones underfoot. Fog curled around my car in pale ribbons and the trees leaned inward. They weren't the friendly kind of trees with full crowns. These were long-limbed things, thin and bare, their branches interlocking overhead like ribs. The building ahead grew clearer in phases. First the silhouette, then the harsh geometry of towers and spires, then stained glass windows that caught moonlight like bruised jewels. And then I saw the people. They were gathered at the entrance in a slow, elegant stream, moving with a kind of ritual precision. Men in black coats cut like old aristocracy. Women in gowns that looked like they belonged on a stage or in a museum, velvet, lace, deep reds and midnight blues. No bright colors. No cheerful pastels. It was as if the entire guest list had agreed to dress for a funeral that somehow ended in romance. I parked among cars that were too sleek, too quiet, too expensive, all black or silver, their surfaces beaded with moisture. My own modest sedan looked like a stray dog that had wandered into a wolf pack. When I stepped out, the cold hit me like a hand around the throat. Not freezing, not winter cold, something sharper. Like the air had been stored somewhere deep underground and brought up for this night. I adjusted my tie, smoothed my jacket, forced myself to walk. As I approached the entrance, the conversations around me were low and musical, in accents I couldn't place. Laughter sounded contained, like it belonged to people who didn't waste emotion. A tall man near the door turned his head to look at me. His eyes caught the moonlight. They were not the color of any human eye I'd ever seen, too reflective, too liquid, like polished garnet. He smiled and his teeth were perfect. A host, I told myself. An actor. Part of the theme. Invitation, he said softly. I patted my pockets. My phone. My wallet. The printed email I'd meant to bring, left on my kitchen counter. My name should be on the list, I said, hearing how weak it sounded in the night air. I'm here for the wedding. His smile deepened as if I'd delivered an excellent joke. The wedding, he repeated. Yes. He leaned closer, not invading my space but making me feel like the space belonged to him. His scent was faintly metallic like old coins. And whose wedding do you believe you attend? I swallowed. The correct answer should have been the couple's names. I didn't know them. My coworker had forwarded the invite with a subject line that just said, "Please go in my place." "I'm a guest," I said. I was invited. The man's gaze drifted over me like a blade testing fabric. Then, in the distance, music swelled, strings slow and aching, the kind of melody you didn't dance to at normal receptions. A hush rippled through the entryway, subtle but immediate. People turned their heads toward the interior, as if something important had begun. The host's expression shifted from amused to attentive. And then, without warning, he stepped aside. "Of course," he said. "Enter. Tonight, all invited souls are welcome." The phrase "invited souls" snagged in my mind, but my feet carried me forward anyway, pulled by the gravity of curiosity and the fear of making a scene. I crossed the threshold. The doors were massive, dark wood carved with twisting vines and unfamiliar symbols. Inside, the wedding hall opened like a cathedral turned decadent. The ceiling soared, ribbed with black beams. Crimson candles lined the aisles and high iron stands, their flames steady despite the draft. Moonlight filtered through stained glass windows and fractured colors, deep reds and purples bleeding across the stone floor like spilled wine. Fog, actual fog, coiled near the ground, thin enough to look intentional, thick enough to make me doubt my senses. And the guests. They stood in clusters, silent in a way that made silence feel like a language. When they moved, it was with deliberate grace, as if every gesture carried meaning. Their skin, I noticed, was pale in the candle glow. Not sickly pale, porcelain pale. Like they belonged to night, not day. I took a few steps into the hall, then stopped. Because at the far end, beneath an arch of black roses and silver thorns, stood the bride. She wore a gown that wasn't simply red, it was blood red, rich and luminous, absorbing the candlelight and returning it like a slow heartbeat. Gothic embroidery traced her bodice in intricate patterns, as if the fabric had been stitched with secrets. Her hair fell long and black, a river down her back. Her skin was so pale it almost glowed. And her eyes, crimson. Not the color of makeup or lighting tricks. The color of something alive in the dark. She was not smiling. She didn't need to. She held the entire hall the way gravity holds the earth. Beside her, a groom waited in black formal wear with silver accents, his posture regal, his expression calm. Together they looked less like a couple and more like monarchs in exile reclaiming a throne. A voice began to speak, low, resonant, words in a language I didn't recognize. The sound rolled through the hall like a vow spoken to the building itself. And that's when the bride turned her head. Slowly, precisely. Her gaze cut across the crowd, across the candles, across the drifting fog, and landed on me. I felt it like a physical touch, like a fingertip under my chin lifting my face. The hall seemed to sharpen into focus around that moment. The candle flames looked brighter, the shadows deeper, the stained glass colors more violent. The bride stared at me for a long heartbeat. Then, something shifted in her expression, something almost like surprise. Not alarm. Recognition. And in that instant, I realized the worst part of my mistake wasn't that I'd wandered into the wrong wedding. It was that someone here had been waiting for me. The ceremony ended without me understanding a single word, yet I knew it had concluded because the air changed. A collective exhale passed through the guests. The music transitioned into something slower, heavier, the first notes of a dance that felt like it belonged to a different century. The bride stepped down from the arch. She moved through the hall, guests parting for her with a kind of reverence that bordered on fear. Her gown whispered against the stone. Candlelight clung to the embroidery like it wanted to be remembered. I stood rooted, every sensible instinct screaming to leave, but my legs refused to cooperate. It was like my body understood something my mind didn't. She approached. Up close, she was even more unreal, features sharp and elegant, lips the color of dark roses, eyes bright as fresh cuts. And yet her expression was calm, almost gentle, as if she had no intention of harming me. Which, strangely, frightened me more than open hostility would have. She stopped an arm's length away. The music swelled. The hall became a stage. She extended her hand toward me, palm up, fingers graceful, an invitation and a command in the same gesture. Her voice, when it came, was soft enough that only I could hear it. "You're late," she said. I blinked. "I'm sorry? I think I'm in the wrong place." Her gaze held mine with terrifying patience, as if she had all the time in the world. "No," she said, and her lips curved slightly, not a smile but the shape of one. "You are precisely where you were meant to be." My throat went dry. "I don't know you." "That is the tragedy," she replied. "And perhaps the mercy." Her fingers remained extended, steady as a promise. "Dance with me," she said. Behind her, the guests watched from the shadows, still, silent, their faces unreadable. I felt their attention like 100 cold eyes against my skin. Whatever this was, it wasn't a casual request. It was a ritual moment, and I was standing at the center of it without knowing the rules. I should have refused. I should have turned and run through the massive doors, back to my car, back to the world where weddings had bad DJs and champagne flutes and awkward speeches. But her hand was there, offered like a bridge over a dark river. And something inside me, curiosity, dread, loneliness, some ancient animal instinct, reached for it. When my fingers touched hers, I expected cold. Instead, her skin was cool, yes, but not dead. More like marble warmed by moonlight. A chill traveled up my arm, not unpleasant but startling, like stepping into deep water. She stepped closer. The scent of her was night air and roses and something coppery beneath it. "Listen to me," she murmured as she guided me toward the dance floor. "Do not speak to anyone else unless I allow it." My heart hammered. Allow it? Her crimson eyes flicked toward my throat, and the glance was so quick, so subtle, that I almost convinced myself I imagined it. "You are surrounded by hunger dressed in silk," she said softly. "And you are wearing your pulse like a lantern." I swallowed hard. Her hand tightened around mine. "And if you wish to leave here alive," she continued, "you will let me lead. The orchestra, because it wasn't a DJ, it was a live string ensemble tucked into the shadows, played a waltz that sounded like longing made audible." She placed one hand at my shoulder, the other at my waist, and drew me into the rhythm with effortless control. I was not a good dancer. I was barely a dancer at all. But with her guiding me, my feet obeyed. The world narrowed to the circle of her arms, the sweep of her gown, the glint of candlelight in her eyes. As we moved, the guests rotated around us like planets around a sun. Their faces blurred at the edges of my vision, but I felt them watching, measuring. "She shouldn't," someone whispered from the darkness. "She can," another voice replied, amused. "She must not." A soft laugh, feminine, cruel. The bride, no, the vampire woman, tilted her head slightly as if she heard every word. "Do not fear them," she said to me, though her tone implied the opposite. "Fear your own kindness. It will betray you tonight." I tried to speak, but the words tangled. "What is this?" I finally managed. She looked at me with an expression that was, for a fleeting second, nakedly sad. "A wedding," she said. "And a funeral, depending on how the story ends." My blood turned to ice. We spun beneath stained-glass moonlight. The fog curled around our feet. Her gown moved like liquid red shadow. And then she leaned close enough that her lips almost brushed my ear. "My name is Seraphine Valancourt," she whispered. "And you, human, are the reason this hall is still standing." I stared at her, breath caught. "I don't understand." No, she agreed softly. Not yet. She drew back, her gaze locking onto mine with hypnotic intensity. But you will. And as the waltz carried us deeper into the night, I realized the most terrifying truth of all. I wasn't just an accidental guest. I was part of the ceremony. And the dance had only just begun. Seraphine's hand stayed on mine as if it had always belonged there, and with every slow turn of the waltz, the hall seemed to rearrange itself around us. Candles shifting in perspective, stained glass saints and devils sliding past overhead, the silent guests forming a living perimeter that tightened whenever I drifted too close to the edge. I tried to count my breaths to calm down. It didn't help. My pulse felt indecently loud, like an argument in a library. Seraphine moved with a control that wasn't just skill, it was certainty. She didn't look at her feet, didn't hesitate on turns. She guided me the way a tide guides a drowning man, not unkindly but without asking permission. Up close, I noticed details that made my stomach clench. The faint shimmer of something like powdered ruby at the corner of her eyes. The embroidery on her gown, thorned vines, roses in different stages of bloom, and shapes that could have been letters if my brain would stop shaking long enough to interpret them. Her hair smelled faintly of rain on stone. "You're trembling," she observed, voice soft, almost amused. "I'm surrounded by people who look like they came from a costume department," I whispered back. "And you're telling me I'm wearing my pulse like a lantern." Her gaze flicked up, catching mine. "I told you the truth. You should thank me. I don't even know what you are." "Careful," she murmured, and the single word carried weight like a warning bell. We continued to move. The orchestra strings lifted and fell like a slow tide, and for a moment I could almost pretend this was normal. A strange themed wedding, an immersive experience, a wealthy family's eccentric taste. Then I saw the mirrors. They lined one wall between towering pillars, antique glass framed in black metal, the kind you'd find in a museum. Guests passed them without reflection. The fog and candlelight reflected. The chandeliers reflected. But the people didn't. My steps faltered. Seraphine tightened her hold, pulling me through the stumble so smoothly no one would notice. "Do not look," she whispered. "Not like that." My mouth went dry. "So it's true. What you fear is rarely the full truth," she replied. "But yes, they are not like you." Her words landed with a strange gentleness, as if she weren't confirming a nightmare but explaining a rule of weather. I forced my eyes away from the mirrors, but the absence of those reflections followed me like a shadow inside my skull. Around us, the guests watched, men and women with perfect posture and ancient-looking jewelry, their expressions controlled to the point of cruelty. Their eyes tracked me with predatory patience. The hall smelled faintly of incense and roses, and underneath it, something metallic like a memory of blood. Seraphine steered us toward the center of the dance floor where moonlight pooled and fractured crimson from the stained glass. Her gown seemed to drink the color. She moved closer, close enough that I felt the coolness radiating off her skin. "You must not leave yet," she said. My throat tightened. "You can't just say that. I can walk out." "You could try," she replied. Her tone stayed calm, but something sharpened beneath it. "And if you reached the gates you would find them closed. If you reached the road you would find yourself turned around. That's not possible." "It is tonight." I stared at her, anger cutting through the fear in a desperate flare. "What? Why me?" For the first time her expression faltered. The calm mask cracked just enough to reveal something raw underneath, fatigue maybe, or grief. A sadness so old it looked like it had settled into her bones. "Because you came," she said simply. "And because my family's laws are ancient, and they do not care about your innocence." The word family made me glance toward the arch where she had stood as bride. The groom was still there, no longer the center of attention but still watched, like a statue with a heartbeat. His gaze followed Seraphine. When his eyes found mine I felt it like pressure behind the ribs. "Who is he?" I asked. Seraphine didn't look at him. "His name is Lucien." "The groom." "The intended," she corrected. I blinked. "So you're not marrying him?" Her lips curved faintly, bitterly. "Not in the way you understand marriage." The orchestra shifted into a darker progression, the waltz turning heavier, as if the melody itself had learned to mourn. Seraphine's voice dropped even lower. This wedding is a treaty. A treaty between who? Between my house and what remains of the old bloodlines, she said. Between hunger and restraint. Between those who still pretend we can coexist with your world, and those who believe we should burn it. My mind struggled to hold the words. And what does any of that have to do with me? Seraphine's gaze finally lifted, and in her crimson eyes I saw something like resolve. You are a witness, she said. And you are a key. Before I could ask what that meant, a ripple went through the crowd. A subtle shift, like animals sensing weather. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Someone was approaching. A woman in a gown of deep violet stepped into the candlelight at the edge of the dance floor. Her beauty was sharp and theatrical, like a dagger set with gemstones. Her hair was pinned up with silver combs shaped like lilies. Her eyes were dark but not human dark, more like a void trying to imitate warmth. She smiled at Seraphine, and the smile felt like a blade laid gently on skin. Cousin, she said. Seraphine's posture didn't change, but the air around her seemed to tighten. Isolde. Isolde's gaze shifted to me. I felt the weight of it immediately, clinical, hungry, amused. And this, Isolde continued, must be the surprise. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. My body understood predator better than my mind did. Isolde walked closer, her steps silent, the hem of her gown gliding through fog. She circled us as if inspecting merchandise. A human, she mused. How bold. How sentimental. Seraphine's hand tightened around mine again. He is under my protection. Isolde laughed softly. Protection? During a treaty wedding? How romantic of you. She leaned toward me, close enough that I smelled perfume over the copper scent, something floral and poisonous. What is your name? She asked. I opened my mouth but Seraphine spoke first. You don't need his name, Seraphine said. Leave. Isolde's smile widened. Oh, Seraphine. You can't still believe you can keep secrets inside this house. The walls themselves whisper. She lifted one gloved finger and traced the air near my throat, not quite touching, as if drawing attention to the pulse there. So alive, she whispered. It's almost obscene. My stomach turned. Seraphine's voice stayed calm, but it carried steel. Touch him and I will tear your tongue out. The crowd didn't react, but I sensed their interest intensify, like this was the entertainment they'd been waiting for. Isolde straightened, delighted rather than threatened. There she is. The Valancourt temper. I was afraid marriage would tame you. Seraphine didn't answer. Isolde's gaze drifted toward Lucien by the arch, your intended watches. Shouldn't you be honoring him instead of dancing with your prey? That word, prey, made my skin crawl. Seraphine's eyes flashed brighter, a brief flare of crimson intensity like a coal catching air. He is not prey, she said. Isolde hummed thoughtfully. Then what is he? Seraphine's fingers tightened on mine, and for a second I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she said it anyway, like a confession forced into the open. He is proof, she said. Isolde blinked, surprised, and that surprise made her look almost human for a fraction of a second. Proof? Isolde repeated. Of what? Seraphine's gaze locked on mine, and I felt something in that look. An apology, maybe? A warning. A promise that whatever came next would not be gentle. Of a debt, she said. And of a curse. The music continued, but now it sounded distant, muffled, like it was playing at the bottom of a lake. Isolde took a step back, her smile returning, slow and vicious. How fascinating. She tilted her head. Tell me, human, do you know why the Valancourt Hall is still standing? Do you know why our family still breathes when so many others have turned to dust? I shook my head, barely able to move. Isolde's eyes glittered. Because someone once made a bargain. A human bargain. A human mistake. Her gaze sharpened. And I think you might be the echo of it. Seraphine's jaw tightened. Enough. Isolde lifted both hands in mock surrender. As you wish, bride who isn't. Enjoy your dance. She turned, her violet skirts sweeping through candlelight, and drifted back into the shadows, leaving behind a cold wake of attention. When she was gone, I realized I had been holding my breath. Seraphine guided me into the next turn, but the rhythm had changed. Her movements were still graceful, but there was urgency now, like she was trying to carry us somewhere before the room could decide what to do with me. Who was she? I asked, voice cracking. A predator, Seraphine replied. One who wears etiquette like perfume. And Lucien, he's okay with this? With you, dancing with me? Seraphine glanced toward him at last. Lucien still watched, expression unreadable. But his eyes were fixed on us with a stillness that felt like a blade suspended above a neck. He is not okay, Seraphine said softly. He is bound. Bound to you? She hesitated. Bound to the treaty. My mouth went dry again. What happens to me when the treaty is complete? Seraphine's gaze returned to mine, and in it I saw a flicker of something dangerously human, regret, maybe, or fear. That depends, she said, on whether you can remember. I frowned. Remember what? Seraphine drew me closer, the fog swallowing our feet. Her voice became so quiet I felt it more than heard it. Tonight, she whispered, your blood will try to tell you a story your mind has forgotten. Her fingers slid slightly along my wrist, not a caress but a check, like she was feeling my pulse the way someone checks the time. And if the wrong person hears it first, she continued, you will not leave this hall as yourself. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? Seraphine didn't answer directly. She lifted her chin toward the stained glass windows where moonlight bled red and purple. It means, she said, you must trust me long enough to hate me later. The orchestra reached a crescendo, and the guests began to drift closer, as if the dance floor was shrinking. Shadows leaned in. Whispers thickened. I felt surrounded, not by bodies but by appetite. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. She changed direction abruptly, guiding us off the dance floor and toward a side corridor half hidden behind hanging velvet drapes. As we moved, her voice tightened with urgency. Do not look back, she said. Of course I looked back. And I saw Lucien step down from the arch for the first time. He moved with the same impossible grace as Seraphine, his black coat catching candlelight like polished obsidian. His gaze was fixed not on Seraphine, but on me. Not with jealousy. With recognition. My heart slammed against my ribs. Seraphine pulled me through the drapes and into darkness. The sound of the hall dulled behind us, swallowed by thick velvet and stone. The corridor was narrow, lit only by intermittent wall sconces with crimson flames. The air smelled colder here, older, like sealed rooms and forgotten prayers. Seraphine released my hand, but only to grip my sleeve and pull me forward faster. What is happening? I demanded, voice harsh in the confined space. She didn't slow down. You have been seen. I was already seen. No, she said sharply, and the edge in her voice startled me. Not like this. Not by him. Lucien? Seraphine's jaw tightened. Lucien is not the most dangerous thing in this house. We reached a heavy door at the end of the corridor, black wood, iron handle shaped like a serpent biting its own tail. Seraphine pressed her palm to it, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the door clicked open as if unlocking itself. She pushed it inward. Inside was a room that didn't belong in a wedding hall. It was a chapel, small, private, and stripped of ceremony. The walls were lined with faded tapestries showing scenes of saints pierced by spears and angels with broken wings. A stone altar sat at the far end, stained dark as if something had seeped into it over centuries. In the center of the room stood a single mirror, taller than a man, framed in black iron. Unlike the others in the hall, this mirror's surface wasn't smooth. It rippled faintly like water trying to hold still. Seraphine turned to me, her face set with decision. This is where you stop being an accident, she said. My voice came out thin. What is that mirror? Her crimson eyes held mine. A confession. I shook my head. I don't understand. Seraphine stepped closer, and the cold of her felt stronger here, amplified by the stone walls. You walked into my family's wedding, she said. That should have been impossible. Humans do not find Valancourt unless they are led. I wasn't led. My GPS. Your GPS is not a god, she cut in. Then her voice softened slightly. Listen. There is something in you that called to this place. Something older than your name. She gestured toward the rippling mirror. That mirror does not show what you are. It shows what you owe. My breath caught. Oh who? Seraphine's gaze flicked briefly to the door, as if afraid someone might be listening. Us, she said. And yourself. I stared at the mirror. Its surface shimmered, and for a moment I thought I saw a shape moving inside it, like a shadow swimming beneath ice. Seraphine's voice dropped again. Look, she said. I hesitated, every instinct screaming not to. But I was already here, already in too deep. I stepped toward it. The air near the mirror felt different, charged like standing too close to a storm. I looked into the glass. At first I saw myself, black suit, pale face, eyes too wide. Then the reflection blinked out. The mirror darkened and an image began to form, like ink spreading in water. A younger man appeared. Not me. Similar but not. He wore old-fashioned clothing, white shirt, dark vest, sleeves rolled up. His hands were stained with something dark. Blood. He stood in this same chapel, but it looked different, newer, candlelit by dozens of flames. Around him, shadows moved, figures with pale faces and red eyes watching. The young man's mouth moved, and though I couldn't hear his words, I felt them in my bones. A vow. A bargain. Behind him, Seraphine appeared in the mirror, but not in her red gown. She wore a simpler dress, ivory, her hair braided. Her expression was not calm then. It was terrified. The young man reached out and took her hand, and when their skin met, the mirror flashed crimson. Pain stabbed behind my eyes. I gasped, stumbling back. Seraphine caught my shoulders, steadying me with strength that didn't match her delicate frame. What was that? I choked out. Her expression had shifted. The gentle mask was gone. What remained was something fierce and frightened. A memory, she said. Not yours, but tied to you. I swallowed hard. Who was he? Seraphine stared at me like she was trying to decide how much truth I could survive. His name, she said slowly, was Elias Harrow. The name hit me strangely, like hearing a word I'd forgotten I knew. And he, Seraphine continued, is the reason I am still here. The chapel seemed to tilt. I forced the words out. So I'm related to him. Seraphine's eyes flickered. Perhaps. Or perhaps you are something worse. What could be worse than being related to a guy who made bargains with vampires? Seraphine's lips parted slightly, and for a moment she looked almost vulnerable. Being the bargain, she whispered. The candle flames in the sconces flared as if reacting to her words, and the mirror's surface rippled harder, like something inside had stirred awake. From beyond the chapel door, faintly, came the sound of footsteps, slow, unhurried, deliberate. Seraphine's gaze snapped to the door. They've noticed, she murmured. My heart raced. Who? Seraphine leaned in close, her voice a knife wrapped in velvet. If you want to live, she said, you will do exactly what I say next, without asking questions. I nodded, barely breathing. Seraphine turned toward the mirror again, and her hand rose, hovering over its rippling surface. Then dance, she said softly, not to the hall this time, but to the mirror itself. And the mirror, like a throat swallowing, opened. The mirror didn't open like a door. It opened like a wound. The rippling surface deepened from reflective glass into something with depth, black water lit from beneath by a slow, crimson pulse. The air in the chapel shifted, tugging at my suit jacket, pulling at the loose ends of my thoughts. My ears filled with a pressure like descending too fast in an elevator. Seraphine's hand slid into mine again, not gently this time but with purpose, anchoring me. Do not let go, she said. I'm not, my voice fractured. I'm not going in there. You already are, she replied. And then the mirror took the room and folded it. For one impossible instant, I felt myself stretched, like my body was a thought being pulled through a needle's eye. Cold knifed through me, absolute and clean, and the world became a thin line of crimson light. Then gravity returned. My shoes struck stone. The air smelled of wet earth, old iron, and smoke that had soaked into walls for centuries. I sucked in a breath and tasted something bitter, like nightshade in the back of the throat. We weren't in the chapel anymore. We stood in a corridor that looked like Valancourt's spine, deeper than the parts meant for guests. The stone here was darker, almost slick, as if it had absorbed generations of candle soot and whispered secrets. The ceiling pressed low. The sconces weren't candles now but small red flames that burned without wax, as if fed by something invisible. Seraphine released my hand only to cup my face, brief, firm, a startlingly intimate gesture that made me freeze. Look at me, she commanded. I met her eyes. Up close they weren't just crimson, they were layered like a deep gemstone with shifting light inside. Her face looked carved from elegance and exhaustion. You can panic later, she said. Right now you breathe. You follow. You survive. I nodded, barely trusting my voice. She stepped back, her gown whispering, and listened, head slightly tilted. Footsteps. Closer now. Beyond the mirror we'd come through, somewhere behind that corridor's turn, someone was moving with the steady confidence of a hunter who already knew the path. Seraphine's jaw tightened. "Lucien?" I whispered. "No," she said sharply, and I felt the single syllable tremble with hatred. "Not him. Worse." My stomach dropped. She pulled me down the corridor, her pace swift and silent despite the heavy gown. We turned left, then right, through passages that felt less like architecture and more like anatomy, tight, winding, designed to confuse intruders. "Where are we?" I hissed. "In the underways," she said. "Where the house keeps what it cannot bury." That did nothing to calm me. The red flames trembled as we passed, reacting to Seraphine like dogs to a master. I caught glimpses of heavy doors set into the walls, iron-bound, marked with symbols that made my eyes ache to look at too long. Behind one, something thudded, slow, steady, like a heartbeat in a coffin. I flinched. Seraphine didn't stop. "Do not listen," she said. "They want you to listen." "They?" She glanced back at me, and for the first time there was real fear in her expression. Not fear for herself. Fear for me. "We keep our mistakes down here," she said. "And tonight they think you belong with them." The corridor opened into a circular chamber. The ceiling rose higher here, forming a dome carved with reliefs, vines, wolves, wings, and scenes that looked like lovers kneeling before crowned figures with fangs. In the center of the chamber was a dry fountain filled with black roses turned brittle with age. Seraphine stopped at the fountain's edge and pressed her palm to the stone rim. A soft shiver ran through the chamber. Then the roses crumbled inward, collapsing like ash, revealing a stairwell spiraling down. Of course there was a stairwell. Seraphine looked at me, her face lit from below by the red flames. "This is the point where you either trust me," she said, "or you die upstairs." My throat tightened. "That's not a choice." "It is the only honest one you have," she replied. I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand a receipt for reality and return this entire night. Instead, I stepped forward and followed her down. The stairs were damp. My hand slid along the stone wall for balance, and my fingers came away cold, slick with condensation. The deeper we went, the quieter it became, until even my breathing sounded intrusive. At the bottom, we entered a long vaulted hall lined with alcoves. In each alcove stood a coffin. Not decorative. Not symbolic. Real, stone and iron, sealed with wax that had darkened to the color of dried blood. Some were chained. Some were wrapped in thorned wire. Some had claw marks gouged into the lids from the inside. I slowed, horror crawling up my spine like insects. Seraphine's voice was low. "Do not stop." A sound came from one of the coffins, a slow scrape, like a nail dragged along stone. My heart pounded so hard it blurred my vision. Seraphine gripped my wrist and pulled me faster. "This is insane," I whispered, teeth chattering. This is old," Seraphine said. "And very real." We reached another door at the far end, unlike the others, taller, newer, carved with the serpent biting its tail. Seraphine pressed her forehead to the wood for a brief moment as if gathering strength. Then she pushed it open. Inside was a room that looked nothing like the rest of the underways. It was warm. Not comfortable warm, but alive warm, like a room with a living heart. Red light flickered from braziers set into the floor. The walls were covered in black velvet drapes, and between them hung portraits, oil paintings old and meticulous. Faces stared out, pale men with cold eyes, women with elegant throats, children who smiled without warmth. All vampires. At the room's center stood a massive table carved from dark wood, etched with the same thorn vine patterns as Seraphine's gown. On the table lay a book the size of a gravestone, bound in something that looked too organic to be leather. Seraphine released my wrist. "Stand there," she said, pointing to a spot near the table. "Do not touch anything." I obeyed because obedience felt like the only currency I had left. Seraphine moved to the book. Her fingers hovered over the cover with something like reverence, then she opened it. The pages were thick, yellowed, inked in a script that moved slightly when I looked at it, as if the letters weren't dead but resting. Seraphine spoke softly in that unfamiliar language I'd heard in the ceremony. The red flames in the braziers flared. The portrait seemed to lean in. And then, from the far corner, a figure stepped forward that I hadn't noticed. An old man, if he could be called that. His hair was white, long and thin like spider silk. His skin looked like parchment stretched over bone. He wore a dark robe that hung off him as if the fabric feared touching him. His eyes were not red. They were black. Not dark brown. Not shadowed. Black like wells that never reached bottom. I froze. Seraphine turned toward him, and for the first time since I'd met her, she bowed her head. "Grandfather," she said. The old man smiled. It wasn't a warm smile or even a cruel one. It was the smile of someone who had waited a very long time for something to ripen. "So," he said, voice dry as dust. "The echo arrives." My throat closed. I tried to speak. Nothing came. His gaze drifted over me, pausing at my throat, my wrists, my eyes, as if evaluating the quality of meat. Seraphine stepped between us without thinking, like a shield. "He is mine to protect," she said. The old man's smile widened. "Sweet Seraphine. You still speak as if love is a law." Seraphine's eyes flashed. "It should be." "Once," the old man murmured almost fondly. "Once, perhaps." He moved closer. I realized he didn't walk so much as glide, each step too smooth, too controlled, the floor seeming to yield to him. "What is your name, human?" he asked. Seraphine's posture stiffened. I swallowed hard and forced the words out. "Daniel." The old man repeated it like tasting. "Daniel." He turned his head slightly, as if listening to something only he could hear. "Your blood does not agree." A chill went through me. "What?" Seraphine's voice tightened. "He is not." The old man lifted a hand, silencing her without touching her. "Bring the ledger," he said. Seraphine's fingers curled into fists at her sides. For a moment I thought she might refuse outright. Then she exhaled, controlled, and slid the massive book toward him. The old man placed his palm on the open page. The ink shifted. Letters rearranged. A name formed in front of my eyes. Elias Harrow. My stomach lurched. Seraphine's gaze snapped to the page, fury sparking. The old man chuckled softly. "There you are." I stared at the name as if it might crawl off the page. "I'm not," I began. "That's not. My name is." "Names," the old man said, dismissive, "are clothing. Blood is skin." He looked at Seraphine. "The debt breathes again." Seraphine's voice was low and shaking. "He is not the same man." "No," the old man agreed. "He is the echo. The continuation. The clause you thought you could escape by forgetting." My mind tried to snag on the word clause, like this was a contract dispute in a courtroom rather than a nightmare in an underground vampire sanctum. "What debt?" I demanded, voice louder than I intended. Cracked on the last word. "What did he do?" The old man's eyes returned to me. "He promised us a door," he said. "A way to walk in your world without burning. A way to feed without war. A way to endure when the sun grew crueler." My skin crawled. "And in exchange," he continued, "we gave him what humans always ask for." Seraphine whispered, almost inaudible. "Time." The old man smiled. "Yes, time. For his beloved. For his family. For his fragile line." My mouth went dry. "So he made a deal. Fine. But what does that have to do with me?" The old man tapped the page and the letters shifted again. A symbol appeared, an intricate seal of thorn vines around a drop shape. "The debt was not paid," he said. "And debts do not vanish. They migrate." He leaned closer and I smelled dry earth and ancient incense. "You carry the unpaid portion." Seraphine's voice snapped, sharp as breaking glass. "He carries nothing. You are twisting." The old man's gaze flicked to her, and the room's warmth seemed to dim under it. "Careful," he murmured. "You are still my granddaughter." Seraphine held his gaze, unflinching, but I felt her tension, the tightness of someone standing on the edge of a blade. The old man turned back to me. "Tonight's wedding," he said, "was to bind Seraphine to Lucien and in doing so bind our house to his. An alliance of bloodlines." He smiled faintly. "And then you arrived. And the house whispered, 'The debt returns.'" My pulse roared in my ears. Seraphine stepped forward. "He didn't come for you. He came by mistake." The old man's smile became almost pitying. "There are no mistakes in a hungry house." He lifted his hand and gestured toward the portraits. The eyes in the paintings seemed to sharpen, to focus on me. "Do you feel it?" the old man asked. "The pull? The recognition? Your blood remembers even if your mind does not." A wave of dizziness hit me. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. then jerked my hand back, remembering Seraphine's warning not to touch anything. Too late. The moment my skin met the table, heat surged up my arm. Pain flashed behind my eyes. A memory slammed into me, violent and vivid. Candlelight. A woman crying softly. A young man, Elias, standing with his hands covered in blood, shaking as he spoke words that tasted like iron. Seraphine, different, younger, standing opposite him, her eyes wet, her lips trembling. The old man watching from shadows, smiling. Then Elias pressing his palm to his own throat and drawing a blade across. Just enough to bleed, not enough to die. Blood dripping onto a seal. The seal glowing. Seraphine gasping as if something inside her snapped into place. I staggered back while rising. Seraphine caught me again, fingers digging into my arms. "Stop," she hissed at the old man. "You're pushing him too hard." "I'm waking him," the old man replied calmly. "There is a difference." I shook, vision blurring. What did he do to her?" Seraphine's face tightened, grief flashing. "He bound my life to his line." The words hit me like a fist. "You're alive because of my family?" I whispered, horrified. Seraphine's voice broke slightly. "I am trapped because of your family." Silence. The kind that rings. The old man watched us like a spectator at theater. "Elias Harrow loved Seraphine," he said. "Or he believed he did. He did what humans do when they love something they cannot keep, he tried to own it." Seraphine's eyes glittered with something dark. "He tried to save me from you." The old man nodded. "And in doing so he ensured you would never truly be free." I stood there trembling, trying to process a love story that felt like a crime scene. "So what now?" I asked, voice raw. "You kill me? You use me? You what? Marry me?" The old man chuckled softly. "Marriage is for politics. You, Daniel, or Elias, are for closure." Seraphine's grip tightened on my arm. "No." The old man's eyes slid to her. "You are in no position to deny the house what it is owed." Seraphine stepped fully between us now, her gown pooling like spilled blood at her feet. "You want the debt paid?" she said, voice low and steady. "Then take it from me. Not him." The old man regarded her with that bottomless gaze. "You would sacrifice yourself for a human you have just met." Seraphine's voice turned bitter. "I met him a long time ago. Just not as him." My stomach lurched again. The old man smiled. "Ah, the romantic tragedy returns." He lifted a hand toward Seraphine, and the air thickened, pressure building like a storm's prelude. Seraphine didn't flinch. And then from the doorway behind us, a new voice spoke, smooth as polished marble. "That is enough." Lucien stepped into the room. He looked even more unreal down here, black formal wear immaculate, silver detailing at his cuffs and collar catching the red brazier light. His face was handsome in a way that felt designed, like a predator sculpted itself into beauty to disarm prey. His eyes were crimson too, but colder than Seraphine's, more disciplined, less alive. He looked at Seraphine first. Something unreadable passed between them, duty, resentment, a history I couldn't see. Then Lucien's gaze moved to me. And the recognition I'd felt upstairs returned, heavier now, undeniable. "You," he said quietly. "So the house finally opens its mouth." The old man inclined his head slightly as if acknowledging a prince. "Lucien. Welcome. You arrive at a perfect moment." Lucien's eyes didn't leave me. "I have been listening from the hall." I felt the shift when the human touched the table. My skin prickled. Seraphine's voice was sharp. "He is not yours." Lucien's lips curved faintly. "Everything in this house becomes mine when you wear my name." Seraphine's eyes flashed. "I do not wear it." Lucien stepped closer. The air seemed to cool around him as if warmth fled from his presence. "Not yet," he said. My throat tightened. "What is happening? Why are you all acting like I'm property?" Lucien's gaze flicked to me, and for a moment, something like amusement crossed his face. "Because you are valuable," he said simply. The old man smiled approvingly as if pleased Lucien understood the rules. Lucien continued, voice calm. "A human carrying the echo of Elias Harrow is not a guest. It is a lever. A threat. A bargaining chip." Seraphine's voice rose, fierce. "He is a person." Lucien's eyes narrowed slightly, like a wolf considering whether a lamb's protest matters. "And I am an entire bloodline," he said. "We do not lose to sentiment." The room felt too small. The red light too thick. My lungs too human. I looked at Seraphine, desperate. She met my gaze and the softness returned for one brief heartbeat, like a candle flickering in wind. "Daniel," she whispered. "Listen to me." I nodded, barely breathing. "You have one chance," she said, voice trembling with urgency. "When I move, you run. Do not hesitate. Do not look back. Do not." Lucien's gaze snapped to her. "No." Seraphine's posture tightened like a drawn bow. The old man sighed, almost bored. "Children." And then Seraphine moved. It was so fast my eyes barely tracked it. Her gown whipped around like a red storm. She seized the heavy ledger book and slammed it shut, hard enough that the braziers flared and the portrait seemed to shudder. The old man hissed, an ugly, involuntary sound. Lucien lunged. Seraphine grabbed my hand and pulled. "Run." We bolted for the door. Lucien's movement was a blur behind us. I heard the rush of air, the crack of something striking wood. The door frame splintered as he hit it, but Seraphine dragged me through and slammed it shut. The hall beyond was darker now, lit only by the faint red flames and the distant echo of the wedding music, still playing upstairs, oblivious. Seraphine grabbed my face again, her expression wild. "Do you trust me?" she demanded. My voice shook. "I don't have anyone else." "That will do," she said grimly. She pressed her palm to the stone wall, whispering words that made my skin crawl, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow passage barely wide enough for a person. "Go," she said, pushing me toward it. "Go now." I stumbled into the passage. It was pitch dark inside, swallowing light. The air was icy. Seraphine followed, and the wall sealed behind us with a soft, final click. We stood in darkness so complete it felt like being buried alive. Somewhere behind us, through stone, a sound came, Lucien's voice, muffled but furious. "He cannot leave," he said. Seraphine's reply was a whisper close to my ear, so intimate it made my skin prickle. "Then we'll have to rewrite the debt," she murmured. And in the dark, her fingers found my wrist again, steady, cold, certain. "Daniel," she whispered. "Your blood is waking up." I swallowed hard. "What does that mean?" Seraphine's voice trembled, not with fear but with something like dread. "It means," she said, "they're not the only ones hunting you." A low sound drifted through the passage ahead, soft, wet, hungry. Not footsteps. Breathing. Something in the dark inhaled as if smelling me. Seraphine's grip tightened until it hurt. "Do not scream," she whispered. "If it knows you're afraid, it will come faster." My throat closed. And in the total darkness beneath Valancourt, the wedding music upstairs continued to play, a love song for monsters, while something old and starving began to move toward us. The passage was too narrow to run properly. We half stumbled, half slid forward, shoulders brushing stone on both sides. Seraphine's gown snagged and whispered behind her like something alive trying to hold her back. I could barely see my own hands in front of my face, but I felt the corridor breathing, cold air flowing in pulses as if the manor itself had lungs down here. Ahead of us that sound came again. A slow inhale. Wet, patient, intimate. It didn't sound like a person hiding in darkness. It sounded like something that had never belonged in light. Seraphine halted so abruptly I nearly collided with her. Her fingers clamped around my wrist hard enough to numb my hand. "Stop," she mouthed, though I couldn't see her lips. I heard the word in the shape of her breath. I froze. The darkness thickened. Somewhere close enough for my skin to know, it exhaled. A faint, sweet rot drifted toward us, layered over something animal and old. Seraphine leaned in, her cold cheek almost brushing mine, and whispered directly into the space beside my ear. "Hold your breath." I did, lungs burning almost immediately. The creature, whatever it was, shifted in the dark. A soft scrape like nails over stone. Then another inhale, deeper this time. It was smelling for me. My throat tightened with panic. My body wanted to cough, to gag, to suck in air, to run, every human instinct screaming to move. Seraphine's grip tightened again, a silent threat. "Don't." Seconds stretched, thin and unbearable. And then, a sound behind us. Not the creature. Footsteps. Fast. Controlled. Lucien. Even through stone, I felt him the way prey feels a predator's shadow. Pressure in the air, A sudden drop in warmth. Seraphine's head turned sharply toward the sealed wall behind us, as if she could see through it. "They're closing," she whispered. "He's bringing the house down on us." My lungs throbbed. Spots danced behind my eyes. I couldn't hold my breath much longer. Seraphine reached into the darkness and touched the wall with her free hand. Her palm pressed flat, fingers spread. She spoke not loudly, never loudly, but with the precise articulation of someone reciting a law. The stone vibrated. The passage widened slightly, the wall shifting in a slow groan. A seam opened where none existed a moment before. Seraphine pulled me through. We slipped into a chamber that felt like a throat, round, damp, lined with stone carved into repeating rib-like arches. The air here was warmer, heavy with the smell of old water and something coppery underneath. My lungs finally seized their chance and I dragged in a breath, too loud, too greedy. Seraphine winced. "Quiet," she hissed. But it was already done. Somewhere in the passage behind us, the hungry breathing stopped. Silence. Not relief silence. Attention silence. Then the darkness moved. A shape unfolded at the mouth of the passage like a spider easing out of a crack. I couldn't fully see it, but my eyes caught glints, pale slick skin reflecting faint red firelight, limbs too long, joints angled wrong. It crawled with a careful, almost graceful patience, as if it had once known how to dance. And then its face tilted toward me. It had no eyes. Or perhaps it had too many, hidden beneath translucent skin. The sensation of being looked at slammed into me anyway. My legs locked. Seraphine stepped between us and it without hesitation, the red of her gown turning her into a flare in the darkness. She lifted her chin, and her voice became colder than the stone. "Back," she said. The creature paused. The sound came from it, low, vibrating. Not quite a growl. More like a throat trying to remember speech. Seraphine didn't flinch. "You do not touch what is bound to me." The creature's head twitched. It leaned forward a fraction as if testing her authority. Behind us, through the stone, Lucien's footsteps drew nearer, closing the distance with frightening speed. Seraphine's eyes flicked to me for a heartbeat. In them I saw something like apology, and something else sharper. Decision. "Daniel," she whispered. "If you want to live past tonight, you need to do something you will hate me for." "What?" My voice cracked. Seraphine turned slightly, angling her body to shield me from the eyeless thing. "You must let me taste your blood," she said. My stomach dropped so violently it felt like freefall. "No, no." "Listen," she snapped, and the edge in her tone cut through my panic. "Not to feed. Not like that. To bind." My mind scrambled. Bind what? Seraphine's jaw clenched. "You to me. Loud enough that the house hears it. Strong enough that Lucien cannot claim you without tearing through my mark first." My throat went dry. "A mark?" "Yes," she said. "A vow written in flesh." Lucien's footsteps were now so close I could hear them clearly through the corridor, measured, unhurried, as if he had all the time in the world. The eyeless thing crept forward another inch, drawn by my fear, by the heat of my blood, by the simple fact of my living breath. I stared at Seraphine, trapped between monsters and treaties, bargains and bloodlines. "This is insane," I whispered. Seraphine's expression softened, barely. "So is your survival. Choose." I wanted to refuse. To stay human in the only way that felt left, by keeping my body my own. But then Lucien's voice drifted through the stone, too clear to be natural, as if the house itself carried it. "Seraphine," he called, calm and cruel. "You cannot hide him in your roots. I will drink the corridors dry if I must." The eyeless creature trembled, reacting to Lucien's voice like a dog to a whip. Seraphine's eyes hardened. "You hear him?" she murmured to me. "He will not stop. And my grandfather will not stop. If you remain unmarked, you will become currency." Currency. That word hurt worse than the threat of fangs. I swallowed. My hands shook. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, do it." Seraphine's gaze held mine for one long moment. Something in her expression shifted. Relief, grief, hunger restrained by discipline. "Thank you," she said, and it sounded like a confession. She took my hand and guided it up, not to her mouth but to the side of her neck. Feel, she instructed. My fingers touched her skin. Cool, smooth, almost too perfect. I felt no pulse. Seraphine's eyes stayed on mine. I will not take more than I need. I nodded, throat too tight for words. She lifted my wrist to her lips. For a moment nothing happened. Her mouth hovered over my skin, and I felt the cold of her breath. Then her fangs emerged, quietly, elegantly, like knives drawn from velvet. My entire body tensed. Seraphine paused. A question in her eyes, "Are you sure?" I nodded once, a jerky, terrified movement. And she bit. Pain flashed sharp and clean, then melted instantly into something else. Heat, dizziness, a strange rush that made my knees weaken. It wasn't the savage tearing I imagined. It was precise, controlled, intimate in a way that felt almost obscene. Seraphine drank for only a few seconds, but in that time the chamber shifted. The red firelight flared. The stone ribs overhead seemed to tighten, as if the house itself leaned in to witness. Then she pulled back. A single drop of my blood clung to her lower lip. Her eyes burned brighter, but her expression stayed controlled, barely. She pressed her tongue against the wound on my wrist. The sensation, warmth against pain, made my breath hitch. The cut sealed, leaving only a faint, tender ache. Seraphine's voice dropped to a whisper. "Now speak after me." "What?" I panted. "Say it," she commanded, her tone absolute. "Or it means nothing." Lucien's footsteps hit the corridor beyond the passage. I could hear him now without stone muffling. He was right outside, just beyond the seam in the wall. Seraphine gripped my face. Her eyes were inches from mine. "Repeat," she said. "I bind my life to yours for one night." My stomach twisted. "Seraphine." "Now." I forced the words out, voice shaking. "I bind my life to yours for one night." The air snapped. A pressure wave rolled through the chamber like a silent thunderclap. The eyeless creature recoiled as if struck, skittering backward into the passage with a hiss that sounded like steam. Seraphine exhaled, harsh and relieved. And then in the stone wall beside us, a symbol ignited, thorned vines circling a drop shape, glowing crimson. The same seal from the ledger. My skin prickled. I looked down at my wrist. The bite mark had faded to a pale crescent, but beneath the skin, faintly, a dark pattern began to bloom like ink in water, thorned vines curling toward my pulse. Seraphine's mark. My heart hammered. "What did you do to me?" Seraphine's expression was tight with urgency. "I saved you." Lucien's voice cut through the chamber, suddenly close, too close. "Seraphine," he said softly, and there was real anger now under his discipline. "What have you done?" The wall seam behind us widened, stone grinding. Lucien stepped into the chamber. He looked immaculate even here, even underground, even in pursuit. His gaze snapped first to Seraphine, then to my wrist. Something dangerous flickered across his face. "You marked him," he said. Seraphine stepped forward, placing herself between us again, chin lifted like a queen refusing to kneel. "Yes," she replied. Lucien's eyes narrowed. "You defy the treaty." Seraphine's voice turned bitter. "The treaty was written by men who believe women are vessels and humans are cattle." Lucien's lips curved faintly. "And yet you will sign it. You will stand beside me above, and you will smile while our houses watch." Seraphine's eyes glittered. "Not tonight." Lucien's gaze slid to me again and I felt it like ice on skin. "You know what she has done?" he asked me calmly. "She has placed you under her protection, yes. But she has also placed you under her hunger. You are marked like a cup set aside." Seraphine's voice snapped. "Enough." Lucien ignored her. "Tell me, human, how does it feel to be chosen by the bride?" The word bride made Seraphine stiffen. "I didn't ask for any of this," I said, voice shaking but louder now, anger surfacing through fear. "I showed up at the wrong place." Lucien smiled slightly. "There it is. The lie humans tell themselves when fate finds them." He stepped closer. The chamber's warmth seemed to drain away with his approach, as if the braziers dimmed in respect. Seraphine moved to block him. Lucien's eyes flashed. "Do not." Seraphine didn't budge. "You will not touch him." Lucien's voice was deadly quiet. "I can tear through your mark if I wish." Seraphine's jaw tightened. "Then do it. And let your guests see you rip apart your own bride before the vows are complete." Lucien paused. The silence stretched. It was the first time I'd seen him hesitate. Not out of fear but calculation. Behind him, the seam in the wall shivered again, another presence pressing through. The air carried perfume like poison. Isolde. She slipped into the chamber as if she'd been poured out of shadow, violet gown immaculate, eyes glittering with delighted cruelty. Her gaze found my wrist immediately. "Oh," she purred. "How delicious. Cousin, you've finally grown a spine." Seraphine's eyes burned. "Leave." Isolde laughed softly. "No. This is the most entertaining part of the wedding." Her gaze drifted to Lucien and her smile sharpened. "You let her mark him? How careless. Or are you enjoying the drama?" Lucien didn't look at Isolde. His attention stayed on Seraphine and me like we were the only pieces on the board that mattered. "This changes things," Lucien said. Seraphine lifted her chin higher. "Yes." Lucien's gaze softened, dangerously. "Then we will change with it." He looked at me again and his voice turned almost gentle. "You will come upstairs," he said. "You will return to the dance floor. And you will finish what you began, under the eyes of every hungry guest." My stomach twisted. "Why?" Lucien's smile widened just enough to reveal the slightest hint of fong. "Because," he said, "if Seraphine has bound herself to you for one night, then the house will demand the night's conclusion." Seraphine's face tightened. "No." Lucien's gaze sharpened. "Yes. The wedding hall is not simply a room. It is an altar. And you two have just spilled blood under this roof." Isolde clapped her hands softly, delighted. "Oh, this is going to be exquisite." Seraphine's voice dropped to a whisper, but it vibrated with fury. "Lucien. Don't." Lucien leaned slightly toward her, voice low and intimate in a way that made my skin crawl. "You want to keep him alive?" he murmured. "Then you will waltz with him again, above, until the house decides whether your mark is protection or invitation." Seraphine's eyes flicked to me and in that glance I saw fear, real fear, because she knew what the house could decide. And I realized with sick clarity what I had just agreed to. I hadn't escaped the wedding. I had become part of its ritual. Lucien stepped back and gestured toward the seam in the stone. "Up," he said. Seraphine's hand found mine again. Her fingers were cold, trembling faintly now. "Daniel," she whispered, close enough that I felt her breath. "Whatever happens upstairs, no matter what you see, no matter what you hear, do not offer anyone your hand." My voice shook. "Why?" Seraphine's eyes locked on mine. "Because," she whispered, "in this house, a hand offered is a life promised." Lucien's gaze flicked between us and his smile returned, smooth and predatory. "Come," he said. "The guests are waiting." And somewhere far above, the orchestra continued to play, unaware that beneath their music, a human heartbeat had just been written into the manor's old, hungry language. We rose through the stone like a secret being dragged back into daylight. The seam in the wall swallowed us into another narrow corridor, then another, each one warmer than the last, until the air began to smell again like incense and roses and a room full of restrained hunger. My wrist throbbed beneath Seraphine's mark, not exactly painful, more like a second pulse had been stitched into my skin, and vampire heartbeat that kept time with my own. Lucien walked behind us with unhurried confidence, as if the underwaist were simply another hallway in his home. Isolde drifted beside him, violet silk whispering, her eyes bright with the joy of watching something fragile get tested. Seraphine held my hand as though she feared the house might snatch me away the moment she loosened her grip. Her fingers were cold but not trembling anymore. She'd gone still, too still, the way a person goes when they've accepted there's no clean exit, only strategy. We reached a stairwell hidden behind a panel of carved wood. Seraphine pushed it open, and the wedding's music surged toward us like a tide returning. Strings. Slow aching. A melody that didn't want joy, only surrender. At the top of the stairs, the wedding hall waited, unchanged in its grandeur, as if nothing monstrous had happened beneath it. Crimson candles still burned in iron stands. Moonlight still bled through stained glass. Fog still curled across the floor like a living veil. But the guests had shifted. They were gathered in a wide circle now around the dance floor, leaving an open center like an arena. Their faces turned toward us in perfect unison, silent as statues, eyes gleaming with anticipation. I felt their attention hit my skin like cold rain. Someone knew. No worse. The house knew and it had told them. Seraphine squeezed my hand once, a warning and a plea in the same motion. Lucien stepped forward into the circle of candlelight, and the room seemed to tighten around him like a collar. He raised one hand slightly, palm down. The orchestra faltered, then softened into a lower, steadier rhythm. Lucien turned to face the guests and spoke in a voice that carried without effort. "An unexpected witness has arrived," he said. "And in the old ways, the house honors what arrives." The guests did not applaud. They did not murmur. But something rippled through them, interest sharpening into appetite. Lucien's gaze slid to Seraphine. "And my bride," he continued calmly, "has chosen to mark him." Seraphine's posture stayed proud, chin lifted, but I felt the tension in her grip, like holding onto a blade by the wrong edge. Isolde moved to Lucien's side, smiling as if she were attending theater. Lucien's eyes returned to the guests. "So we will proceed by tradition." A whisper of movement ran through the circle. Heads tilted. A few lips parted slightly as if tasting air. My throat tightened. "What tradition?" I whispered to Seraphine. Seraphine didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the far end of the hall where the arch still stood, black roses and silver thorns, a monument to a vow that wasn't finished. Then she whispered, so softly only I could hear. "The trial of hands." My stomach dropped. "That sounds bad." Seraphine's expression didn't change, but her voice carried something like contained panic. "It is worse," she murmured, "because it looks beautiful." Lucien turned toward us fully now, stepping backward into the center as if inviting us forward. His smile was polite, almost gentle. "Come," he said. Seraphine's fingers tightened around mine. "Remember," she whispered, "do not offer your hand to anyone else." "I won't," I breathed. We stepped into the open circle. The temperature felt different here, colder, sharper, as if the candlelight didn't warm, only illuminated. The fog curled thicker around our shoes. I could see my breath now in faint wisps. Lucien watched our approach with a calm that infuriated me. He wasn't frantic. He wasn't angry in the human way. He was simply conducting. When we reached the center, Lucien nodded once toward the orchestra. The waltz began again. Seraphine turned toward me, lifting my hand with deliberate formality, like a queen performing ceremony. Her palm settled against my shoulder. Her other hand found my waist, and we danced. At first it was the same as before, smooth, hypnotic, her body guiding mine into a rhythm my nerves didn't deserve. But now every step felt watched. Every turn felt judged. The guests weren't just observing. They were listening as if the sound of our footsteps carried information. Seraphine leaned close, her lips nearly brushing my ear. "Keep your eyes on me," she whispered. "If you look too long at them, the house will decide you belong." I tried to laugh, but it came out like a broken breath. "And what do you belong to?" Seraphine's eyes flickered with something that looked like pain. "Tonight," she whispered, "you belong to the dead." A subtle motion at the edge of the circle caught my eye anyway. A woman stepped forward from the guests, elegant and pale, dressed in black velvet with a collar of antique lace. She held out her hand toward me, palm up, fingers open. The gesture was polite. The invitation was predatory. My body reacted before my mind. A reflexive twitch, the human instinct to be courteous. My hand started to lift. Seraphine's nails dug into my wrist hard enough to sting. "Don't," she hissed through a smile that looked beautiful to the room. I froze, hand stopping midair. The woman's expression didn't change, but her eyes glinted with annoyance, like a cat denied a toy. She withdrew into the circle again. Lucien watched, amused. "So the bride teaches her witness manners?" he said softly, loud enough for the guests to hear. "Good." Seraphine's jaw tightened. The dance continued, and one by one the guests stepped forward. Always graceful. Always silent. A man with silver hair and a ring shaped like a batwing offered his hand. A young woman with lips stained dark as wine offered hers. A pair of twins, identical and smiling, offered their hands together like a cruel joke. Each time, my instincts tried to respond, politeness, confusion, panic, and each time Seraphine corrected me with pressure, with a smile, with that whispered warning repeating like prayer. "No, no, no." My wrist burned under the mark, as if the bond itself protested my temptation to be human. I realized what the trial of hands was, A test of my boundaries, yes, but more than that, a performance for the house. A demonstration of who held claim over me and how strong that claim was. And I could feel the guests tasting the weakness in that claim the way wolves test fencing. Then the circle shifted. Lucien raised his hand again. The guests stepped back in unison, clearing space. Lucien walked forward, stopping so close I could see the fine texture of his skin, too flawless, too composed. His gaze landed on my marked wrist. "May I?" he asked. The question was polite. But the room went so still it felt like the entire hall was holding its breath. Seraphine's grip tightened. "No." Lucien's smile remained. "Not you. Him." His gaze lifted to mine. "Human," he said softly, "I offer you my hand." My stomach twisted. Every part of me wanted to refuse. But refusing a groom in his own hall felt like insulting a king in a throne room. I glanced at Seraphine. Her expression had gone utterly still, but her eyes were bright with urgency. "Don't." Lucien extended his hand toward me, palm up. The orchestra's music softened, thinning into a single sustained note, like a held breath. Lucien's voice dropped lower, intimate and terrible. "If you refuse," he whispered, "the house will decide you are unruly. If you accept, the house will decide you are willing." My throat tightened. What do you want?" Lucien's eyes flickered. "To see what you are." Seraphine's voice cut in sharp. "He is not a toy for your curiosity." Lucien didn't look at her. "He is a contract written in blood. And contracts are read aloud." His hand remained offered. And I realized the trap. Any choice I made would be interpreted, weighed and used. My mind scrambled for a third option. I did the only thing I could think of. I spoke. "I don't belong to you," I said, voice shaking but loud enough to carry. "And I don't belong to the guests. If your house needs a performance, then watch this." Lucien's brows rose slightly, the first true sign of surprise. I turned, still dancing, still within Seraphine's hold, and lifted Seraphine's hand higher, placing her palm flat against my chest, right over my heart. The gesture wasn't a hand offered outward. It was a hand placed inward. A boundary. A choice. The mark on my wrist flared hot, like a seal pressed into wax. A sound moved through the hall, soft, involuntary, like the guests reacting to a scent they hadn't expected. Seraphine's eyes widened slightly. She understood immediately what I'd done. I hadn't offered my hand to anyone else. I had given Seraphine the point of contact the house cared about most, the heartbeat. Lucien's smile faded by a fraction. The orchestra's single note snapped back into full music, louder now, urgent and dark. The stained-glass moonlight seemed to deepen to a richer crimson, as if the hall itself leaned closer to witness the new shape of the ritual. Isolde laughed softly from the edge. "Oh, that's clever." Seraphine stared at me as if she didn't know whether to be furious or grateful. "You're insane," she whispered. "I'm learning from the best," I whispered back. For the first time since I'd met her, Seraphine smiled, not a vampire's elegant curve, but something human and startled, like joy flashing through fear. Then Lucien spoke again, voice calm but edged. "So the witness chooses the bride," he said. Seraphine's smile vanished. Lucien's gaze slid to her. "Do you understand what that means?" Seraphine's voice turned cold. "It means you're losing control." Lucien's eyes narrowed. "It means the house may demand consummation of the mark." My blood froze. Seraphine's hand on my chest tightened, fingers curling into the fabric of my suit as if she could physically hold my heart in place. "No," she said, voice trembling with contained fury. "It will not." Lucien tilted his head. "Then you should pray the house agrees." At that, a low hum rose through the guests. Not words, not language, but a sound of collective hunger and anticipation. The candle's flames leaned inward as if pulled by an unseen draft. The fog thickened, coiling up around our knees. The hall was responding. It wasn't just a venue. It was an altar with opinions. Seraphine's eyes flicked toward the stained glass windows, then toward the arch. Her face changed, decision hardening. She leaned close, lips almost touching my ear. "We end this," she whispered. "Now." "How?" I breathed. Seraphine's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "By finishing the wedding wrong." Before I could ask what that meant, she released the dance hold and took both my hands, only mine, interlacing our fingers in a way that was undeniably intimate, undeniably visible. The guests' eyes widened, some with delight, some with fury. Lucien's expression sharpened. "Seraphine." She ignored him and pulled me toward the arch. The orchestra's music warped, still playing but strained, like the instruments themselves didn't know which story they were scoring anymore. We walked through fog and candlelight, through a corridor of silent vampires who watched us pass like judges. At the arch, Seraphine stopped. The black roses above us looked almost wet, as if freshly fed. Seraphine turned to face me fully. Her eyes, crimson, luminous, held mine with painful intensity. "I need you to understand something," she said softly. My mouth was dry. "What?" Seraphine's voice shook. "I did not invite you here to use you. I did not mark you to own you. I marked you because if I didn't, they would tear you apart and call it tradition." I swallowed hard. "And now?" Seraphine looked up at the arch, then back at me. "Now," she whispered, "I ask you to choose, freely, what Elias never gave me." My heart hammered. Seraphine lifted my hand, bringing it not to her lips, but to her forehead, pressing my knuckles there like a vow. "Will you trust me," she whispered, "even if it costs you the life you thought you had?" The hall held its breath. Lucien's voice cut through like a blade. "If he answers, the house will bind it." Seraphine didn't look away from me. Her eyes were pleading now, openly. Not seductive. Not predatory. Desperate. And I realized what the proper ending of this wedding was supposed to be. Seraphine bound to Lucien, the treaty sealed, the debt reclaimed through my blood, my life reduced to a clause. Seraphine was offering me a different ending. A dangerous one. A chosen one. I stared at her, feeling the mark on my wrist burn like a question. I should have said no. Said I wanted my old life. Said I wanted daylight and ordinary fear. But when I looked at Seraphine, I saw not a monster asking for my throat, but a prisoner asking for a key. And something in my blood, something older than my name, ached in recognition. "Yes," I whispered. "I trust you." The hall reacted instantly. The candles flared, flames stretching high, turning the shadows violent. The fog surged upward like a living thing. The stained glass windows pulsed with crimson light as if the moon itself had bled. A sound tore through the room, not a scream but a furious, inhuman roar of denial. "Lucien." He moved. Too fast. Seraphine shoved me backward just as Lucien reached the arch, his hand outstretched. Seraphine caught his wrist midair. The impact cracked like thunder. Guests recoiled, finally breaking their stillness, shock rippling through them like wind through tall grass. Lucien's eyes burned. "You cannot." Seraphine's teeth bared, briefly feral. "Watch me." She slammed her palm onto the arch's stone, right beside the black roses, and spoke words that made the air vibrate. The roses blackened further, curling inward like burned paper. The arch, this altar, began to change. The silver thorns twisted, shifting position, reforming into a different pattern, not a crown but a circle. Not a claim but a gate. The hall's floor trembled. Lucien snarled, losing composure for the first time. "You will collapse the house." Seraphine's eyes flashed. "Then let it fall on the lies." She grabbed my hand again and dragged me under the arch. The moment we crossed, the world flickered, like film burning. The hall's candlelight dimmed. The guests' faces blurred. And for an instant I saw something else layered over the scene. Another wedding, older, candlelit in a different way. Elias standing where I stood. Seraphine younger, terrified, trapped. And Elias, smiling like a man who believed he was saving her while he was chaining her. The memory slammed into me so hard my knees buckled. Seraphine caught me, holding me upright. "No," she whispered fiercely. "Not like that. Not again." Her hand rose to my wrist, to the mark. And she did something I didn't expect. She bit her own palm. Blood, dark and rich, spilled over her hand, glinting in candlelight like garnet. The guests hissed, recoiling as if from sacrilege. Lucien's eyes widened. "Seraphine." Seraphine pressed her bleeding palm against my marked wrist. Pain flared, white-hot. I cried out, unable to stop it. The mark burned like fire, then shattered, like glass breaking beneath skin. The thorned vine's pattern unraveled, dissolving into warmth. Seraphine's voice was a whisper through clenched teeth. "I revoke the claim," she said. "I return the debt." The hall convulsed. The candles guttered, flames bending sideways as if sucked toward an invisible drain. The fog whipped violently, swirling into a vortex above the arch. Lucien staggered back as if struck by a force he couldn't see. His expression contorted, not pain exactly but outrage, and something like fear. The old man, Seraphine's grandfather, appeared at the far end of the hall, gliding forward with impossible calm, black eyes fixed on Seraphine. "You would break the ledger," he said softly, almost admiring. Seraphine's gaze snapped to him, fury and grief mixing. "You broke me first." The grandfather smiled. "And now you break the house." Seraphine's voice rose, ringing. "Yes." She turned to me, eyes bright with urgency. "Daniel," she whispered, "when the gate opens, run. Run out and do not stop until you taste morning." I shook my head, panicked. "And you?" Seraphine's lips curved faintly, sorrowful. "I can't follow you into sunlight. Not yet. But I can give you back to your life." The arch behind us, now a twisting circle of silver thorns, began to glow from within, not crimson but pale white like early dawn. A doorway. A way out. Lucien lunged again, faster, furious. Isolde darted forward too, laughter gone, eyes hungry and sharp. Seraphine stepped between them and me, her gown spreading like a pool of blood. "No," she hissed. Lucien's voice was a snarl. "You would choose him over your people?" Seraphine's eyes blazed. "I choose myself." She shoved me backward, hard, toward the glowing arch. I stumbled, arms flailing. The light behind me intensified. The air smelled suddenly of rain and asphalt and city, the outside world bleeding in. Seraphine's gaze locked on mine one last time. Her expression softened, painfully human. "I'm sorry," she mouthed. Then Lucien struck. Not at me. At Seraphine. His hand caught her shoulder, claws tearing fabric. Seraphine gasped, but she didn't fall. She drove her own fangs into his wrist, biting hard enough that black blood spilled. The guest shrieked, finally a real sound, horror and delight mixed. Isolde snarled, moving to intervene. The grandfather raised one hand, and the hall trembled harder, as if he was deciding whether to let this play out or crush it. Seraphine screamed, an inhuman sound now, not pain but rage, and slammed her palm into the arch again. The gate surged. The light exploded outward. And I fell through. For a fraction of a second, everything vanished, music, candles, eyes, hunger. Then I hit wet pavement. Cold rain slapped my face. I gasped, rolling onto my back, staring up at a night sky that looked normal. Clouds, streetlights, power lines. My suit was soaked. My wrist throbbed, but the mark was gone, leaving only faint scars like crescent moons. Behind me, in the space between two ordinary brick buildings, the air shimmered. The arch flickered like a dying screen. I scrambled to my feet, breath ragged, heart hammering. And I saw her. Seraphine stood on the other side of the shimmering gate, framed by candlelight and fog, blood on her hand, gown torn at the shoulder. Her eyes met mine across the thinning doorway. For a heartbeat, the noise of the city receded. There was only rain in her gaze. She lifted her hand, not offering it. Just showing it. A farewell. A promise. Then Lucien's shadow surged behind her. Seraphine turned, baring her teeth, her body squaring like a warrior in a gown meant for ceremony. The gate flickered harder. I stepped forward instinctively. Seraphine's lips moved. I didn't hear the words, but I understood them anyway. Go. The gate snapped shut. The alley became an alley again, empty, wet, smelling of garbage and rain. No candles. No fog. No music. Just me, shaking in my suit, rainwater running down my face like tears I hadn't decided to cry. I stood there for a long time, listening to my own breathing, touching my wrist as if I could find proof in the skin that any of it happened. In the distance, a siren wailed. A car passed. The world continued in its indifferent way. Eventually, I stumbled out of the alley and onto a street I recognized, downtown, closer than I thought possible. As if Valancourt hadn't been miles away beyond dead trees, but tucked inside the city's blind spot all along. I made it home before sunrise. I showered until my skin was raw. I threw my suit in the trash. I sat in my kitchen with all the lights on, waiting for the morning like a person waiting for rescue. When the sun finally rose, pale and ordinary, it didn't feel like relief. It felt like exile. Because the moment daylight touched the windows, I realized the truth Seraphine had hinted at. Blood remembers. And mine was remembering too well. Days passed. I went to work. I answered emails. I drank coffee that tasted like nothing. I laughed at jokes at the exact right moments. I told myself I was fine. But at night I dreamed in crimson. I dreamed of stained glass and fog, of hands offered like traps, of a woman in a blood-red gown standing alone against a room full of hunger. And sometimes, just before waking, I smelled roses and rain on stone. One evening a week later my phone rang from an unknown number. No caller ID. No location. I stared at it until it stopped. A moment later a text arrived. Only 3 words. Your debt breathes. My stomach turned to ice. I dropped the phone as if it burned. When I picked it up again the message was gone, as if it had never been sent. But on my wrist, beneath the faint crescent scars, a thin black line had appeared overnight, like the beginning of a vine. Not a mark. Not a claim. A path. I went to the window and looked out at the city, at its streetlights and late-night traffic and ordinary people who didn't know how thin the world really was. And in the reflection of the glass for just a second, only a second, I thought I saw crimson eyes behind me. Not threatening. Waiting. As if somewhere, in a hall lit by crimson candles and moonlight, the dance was not finished. Only paused. And I understood with a clarity that made my knees weaken. I had escaped the wedding. But I had not escaped the story. Not yet. The days after the wedding felt like living in a film that had ended while the projector kept running. Same streets, same coworkers, same coffee shops, but the sound was wrong, like the world had lost a frequency only I could hear. I stopped wearing watches. Time felt meaningless after you'd watched an ancient manor fold space like fabric. I stopped listening to music on my commute because every melody dragged me back to that waltz. Strings like sorrow, candles like wounds, Seraphine's hand guiding me as if she could steer me through death. The crescent scars on my wrist faded slowly, but that thin black line, the vine-like trace, didn't. It grew in almost invisible increments, a millimeter at a time, curling toward my pulse like it was listening. At night my apartment felt too small. I started leaving the lights off anyway, as if my eyes were adjusting to a new truth. I began noticing shadows the way you notice someone staring from across a room. With certainty, without proof. A week after the wedding I took a different route home, not because I planned to, but because my feet chose it. I ended up on a street I didn't recognize, in a part of downtown that should have been busy but wasn't. Shops were closed. The wind moved trash in slow circles. The air smelled faintly of wet stone, though the sidewalks were dry. And then I saw the alley. 2 brick buildings, ordinary and tired, with a narrow gap between them. Nothing about it screamed, portal to vampire wedding. It looked like a place you'd avoid because it might have needles on the ground. But my blood recognized it. My wrist warmed, not painfully, more like a dog perking its ears. The thin vine under my skin tightened toward the surface, and for a moment I thought I saw it pulse. I stood at the mouth of the alley, heart hammering. I told myself to turn around. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I needed therapy, sleep, and maybe a new job that didn't involve other people's forwarded wedding invitations. Then the air inside the alley shimmered, barely, like heat rising off asphalt on a summer day. I took 1 step forward. Nothing happened. I took another. The shimmer thickened and the sound of the city dimmed, like someone lowering the volume. Streetlights dulled. The wind stilled. My breath became the loudest thing in the world. And then I heard it, the faintest trace of string music. Not from the street. From inside the space between bricks. A whisper of a waltz. My stomach dropped. I backed out immediately, stumbling into the street as if I'd touched an electric wire. Sound returned in a rush. Distant traffic, a car horn, laughter from a bar down the block. The alley looked normal again. But my wrist kept pulsing. That night, I dreamed of Seraphine standing under stained glass while the manor cracked around her like ice. In the dream she didn't reach for me. She held the arch alone, keeping it open with blood and rage, and behind her Lucien's shadow grew until it swallowed the candles. When I woke, my sheets were damp with sweat, and the vine on my wrist had grown another inch. I stared at it until dawn. And I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit. Seraphine hadn't just sent me away to save me. She'd sent me away because I was the only moving piece she could still place outside the house. A key doesn't stop being a key just because it leaves the door. It becomes something else. It becomes leverage. The next message came on a Tuesday. Not on my phone, not on my laptop, not anywhere with a sender address I could trace. It came on paper. I opened my apartment door in the morning and found a cream-colored envelope on the doormat, heavy and expensive-looking, sealed with black wax stamped with thorn vines circling a drop. The Valancourt seal. My hands shook as I picked it up. The wax felt cold through the paper like it had never warmed to the human world. Inside was a single card. No flowery text. No calligraphy flourish meant to charm. Just one line typed in clean letters. The house requests its witness. Below it an address. Not an event venue. Not a hall name. Coordinates. My stomach turned as I read them. They pointed to a spot outside the city limits, the same stretch of road where my GPS had lost service the first time. I tried to throw the card away. I truly did. I carried it to the trash can, held it above the opening, and my wrist burned, hot enough to make me gasp. The vine beneath the skin tightened, and for a second my fingers locked, refusing to let go of the paper. I dropped it anyway. It landed inside the trash with a soft, final sound. 10 minutes later, when I looked again, the trash was empty. The envelope sat back on my kitchen table. Like a quiet threat. I didn't go to work. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even try to rationalize it anymore. Rationalizing is what you do when the universe still negotiates with you. Instead, I sat at my table and stared at the coordinates until the sun began to set. Then I did something I hated myself for. I packed a bag. Not much. Flashlight, water, pocket knife, phone charger, spare shirt. Ridiculous items against vampires, but humans cling to tools the way children cling to blankets. At 11:48 p.m. I drove. The city peeled away, lights thinning into darkness, highways turning into long empty roads. The trees grew denser. The fog returned in pale threads, familiar now, like the breath of something waiting. My phone lost signal exactly where it had before. And there, like a memory made real, were the iron gates. Valancourt. This time I didn't wait for them to open. I got out of my car, cold biting through my jacket, and walked to the gate on foot. My breath clouded in front of me. The forest behind the gates was silent. No insects, no birds, no living noise. I pressed my palm to the iron. The vine under my wrist pulsed. The gate opened. I didn't touch my phone. I didn't pretend this was fine. I walked through because some part of me already knew. If I didn't, whatever Valancourt wanted would find me in my apartment anyway. The drive was longer on foot than in a car, and the fog grew thicker, winding around my ankles like hands. When the manor finally emerged, it looked less like a building and more like an idea. Towering, sharp, impossible, lit by moonlight and crimson candles that burned in windows like watchful eyes. The front doors were open. Waiting. Inside, the hall was quieter than before. No guests. No orchestra. No laughter behind silk. Just candles. And at the center of the dance floor, beneath stained-glass moonlight, stood Lucien. He was alone, immaculate as ever, hands clasped behind his back. His expression was calm, but there was something in it now that I hadn't seen before. Not anger. Satisfaction. "You returned," he said softly, as if greeting a late dinner guest. I swallowed hard. "Where is Seraphine?" Lucien's smile was thin. "Safe. For now." My wrist burned. Lucien's gaze flicked to it. "Ah, the vine grows. The house enjoys you." "I'm not here for the house," I said, voice shaking. "I'm here for her." Lucien tilted his head. "You confuse affection with authority." "I don't care what you call it," I said. "What did you do to her?" Lucien stepped forward slowly, the candles reflecting in his eyes like blood in glass. "She broke the treaty," he said. "She attempted to revoke the ledger. She opened a gate in the middle of a vow." He paused, letting the words sink in. "The house does not forgive humiliation." My stomach clenched. "So you're punishing her?" Lucien's smile sharpened. "I am restoring order." He lifted his hand slightly. Behind him, the stained-glass windows darkened, as if something passed across the moon. Then the hall's shadows shifted, and Seraphine stepped out from behind a pillar. She looked unchanged at first glance, still porcelain, still beautiful, but the details hit like bruises. Her gown gone, replaced with a black dress that clung like mourning, a faint cut at the corner of her lip, her eyes dimmer, as if someone had drained a portion of her fire. But she was standing. And when she looked at me, something in her expression broke through the exhaustion. Relief, fear, and something dangerously close to hope. "Daniel," she whispered. Lucien watched us like a man observing the final moves of a game. "I have offered you a second invitation," he said calmly. "This is generosity." I stared at him. "What do you want?" Lucien's eyes glittered. "Closure." He gestured toward the arch at the far end of the hall. It stood restored now, black roses, silver thorns, pristine as if nothing had happened. The wedding will finish, he said. One way or another. Seraphine's voice snapped, ragged with fury. No. Lucien ignored her, gaze locked on me. You can leave, he said. Right now. Walk out. Return to your daylight. The house will still seek its witness, but perhaps it will take years. Perhaps it will take your children. My blood iced. Lucien continued softly, almost kindly, or you can end it tonight. I looked at Seraphine. Her eyes begged me not to listen, but there was something else there too, an understanding that the threat was real, that Lucien wasn't bluffing for drama. I whispered, what does end it mean? Lucien's smile widened slightly. It means you step beneath the arch, he said, and you choose who holds the debt. Seraphine's voice was barely a breath. Daniel, don't. But my wrist was burning now, the vine pulsing like a heartbeat that wasn't mine, and I realized the house had already begun to write its story into me. If I walked away again it wouldn't stop. It would only spread. I took a step toward the arch. Seraphine flinched as if struck. Lucien's smile deepened. Good. I looked over my shoulder at Seraphine, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. I'm not choosing him, I said. Seraphine's breath caught. I faced the arch. And the candles leaned inward, hungry to hear what I would say. The arch waited like an open mouth. I stepped beneath it and felt the air change, pressure tightening around my ribs, fog curling higher, candles flaring as if the flame recognized authority. The vine under my wrist surged hot, and for a moment the crescent scars throbbed like they remembered teeth. Lucien stood behind me, close enough that I sensed his stillness like a blade held near skin. Seraphine remained in the shadow line of the hall, as if the arch drew boundaries even she couldn't cross without consequence. Her face was pale enough to look carved from moonlight, but her eyes were alive, burning with fear for me and something else, terror of hope. Lucien's voice was soft, ceremonial. Speak, he said. And the house will listen. I swallowed. My mouth tasted like iron. I'm not Elias Harrow, I said louder than I expected. The words echoed in the vaulted space. I didn't make your bargain. The candles shivered but did not dim. Lucien's calm voice came again. Blood does not care for denial. Maybe, I said. But choice does. Lucien laughed quietly. Choice is a human superstition. My wrist burned hotter. The vine lines swelled against the skin, darkening, like the house wanted to write over my spine. I clenched my fist until my nails bit my palm. Pain anchored me. I'm choosing anyway, I said. Lucien's tone sharpened slightly. You cannot choose what you do not understand. I turned my head enough to see him. His eyes were calm, but there was tension there now, an awareness that something unpredictable had entered the ritual. I understand enough, I said. You want the debt bound to someone. You want the witness to become property. You want Seraphine chained so your house can wear her like a crown. Lucien's gaze flickered. Annoyance, then amusement, then something colder. Careful. Seraphine's voice broke from the shadows. Daniel, please. I looked at her. And in that look I saw the whole story. A woman forced into elegance, forced into vows, forced into hunger, still trying to protect the only fragile thing in the room that didn't belong to their world. I turned back to the arch. The air thickened, waiting for my words like a judge waiting for a verdict. I choose to take the debt, I said. Seraphine gasped. Lucien's expression snapped into focus, predatory interest sharpening. Yes, he murmured. That is the correct. And I choose to end it, I finished. The hall froze. Even the fog seemed to stop moving. Lucien's eyes narrowed. Explain. I raised my marked wrist and held it out, palm upward, not offering my hand to a guest, not accepting Lucien's. Offering it to the arch itself, to the house, to the ritual. If the dead is alive, I said, voice trembling but steady, then it can die. Lucien's smile vanished. No. Seraphine stepped forward instinctively, but invisible pressure pushed against her, holding her at the edge of the arch's influence like a barrier. Daniel, she whispered, voice breaking. You'll? I know, I said softly without looking away from the arch, But if it spreads, it won't stop with me. The vine beneath my skin pulsed violently. It wanted to root deeper, to anchor. I realized then what the bargain really was. Not just blood, not just time. A pathway. A channel for the house to reach into the human world and plant its claim across generations. That was why the ledger mattered. Why the witness mattered. Why I mattered. I took a breath and did the only thing I could imagine that the house would hate. I smiled, not bravely, not confidently. Just humanly. Then I pressed my teeth into my own wrist. Blood welled instantly, warm, bright, obscene against pale scars. Seraphine made a strangled sound. Lucien lunged forward, faster than thought, but the arch's thorns flared white, and he slammed into an invisible barrier as if the house itself had decided this was mine to finish. I let my blood drip onto the stone beneath the arch. The floor drank it. The candles roared. The stained glass pulsed crimson like a heart on the verge of rupture. Lucien's voice turned sharp. Stop. I shook my head, shaking with pain, with terror, with adrenaline so intense my vision narrowed. I revoke, I said, forcing the words out like pulling glass from a throat. I refuse the migration. I end the line. The arch answered. Not with language, with sensation. A pressure surged upward from the floor into my bones, and I felt the vine beneath my skin pull outward, like roots being ripped from flesh. I screamed. There was no dignity in it. Only pain. Seraphine cried out too, reaching for me, her hands straining against the invisible boundary. Daniel? Lucien's face twisted, fury breaking through composure. You idiot. You will die. Maybe, I gasped, barely able to stand, but you won't own tomorrow. The vine line tore free. Not physically, no gore, no roots, but I felt it unravel inside me, a supernatural tension snapping like a rope. The crescent scars flared white-hot, then cooled. The hall convulsed. The candles guttered, flames bending toward the arch as if being sucked into a drain. The fog spiraled upward. The stained glass darkened as if the moon itself had blinked. And then the arch cracked. A hairline fracture split the stone, then another, spreading like lightning across the black roses and silver thorns. The roses withered instantly, turning to ash that rose into the air like black snow. Lucien staggered back, eyes wide now, not fear of death but fear of losing control. Seraphine's grandfather appeared at the far end of the hall, gliding forward, black eyes gleaming with something like admiration. Ah, he murmured. A human with a spine. Lucien turned on him, furious. He is destroying the house. The grandfather's smile was thin. The house was built on a debt. Debts make poor foundations. Seraphine's eyes were locked on me, what now? Tears, though I didn't know vampires could still cry. The invisible barrier around her shuddered, weakened by the arch's fracture. I looked at her, breathing hard, wrist bleeding slowly. Seraphine, I rasped. Take it. Take what's left. Not my blood, my choice. She shook her head violently. I can't. You can, I whispered. Because it's yours now. Your life is yours. The barrier snapped. Seraphine surged forward, catching me as my knees gave out. Her arms wrapped around me with strength that felt almost human in its desperation. Lucien roared and lunged again. Seraphine turned, baring her fangs, eyes blazing with renewed fire. But before impact, the arch collapsed. Not down into rubble but inward, folding space like the mirror had, but violently, uncontrollably. The hall screamed with soundless pressure. Candles blew out in a wave. The stained glass shattered without falling, breaking into light. A white void opened where the arch had been. A gate with no destination. Lucien tried to retreat, but the floor beneath him fractured into fog, and the void pulled at him like gravity. Isolde, who had been watching from the shadows, finally screamed, real fear cracking her composure. She darted backward, disappearing behind pillars as the hall began to eat itself. The grandfather didn't move. He watched with calm fascination as the house he'd ruled for centuries began to unravel. Seraphine clutched me tighter, dragging me backward toward the main doors. Move, she hissed. Move. I stumbled with her, half carried, half walking, wrist bleeding into my sleeve. Behind us, the void expanded, swallowing candle stands, tapestries, entire sections of floor as if the manor were being erased from inside. Lucien's roar turned into something else, rage sliding into panic. The grandfather's voice carried one last time, almost thoughtful. Perhaps, he murmured, this is what freedom looks like. Seraphine slammed through the front doors with me and cold night air hit like mercy. We stumbled down the steps into fog that was already thinning, the forest beyond the gate visible like a normal forest again. The manor behind us groaned, stone complaining like an animal dying. Seraphine shoved me toward the gates. Go, she panted. Go now. Don't look back. I turned to her, desperate. Come with me. Seraphine's eyes flicked toward the manor. If I cross fully into your world while the house collapses, it may drag me back through the debt's echo. I ended it, I whispered. You ended the line, she corrected softly. But not the hunger. Not the old ones. Not Lucien, if he survives. The manor screamed again, this time audibly, stone and air and magic twisting. Seraphine grabbed my face, forcing me to look at her. Listen, she said, voice shaking. You did something no one has done in centuries. You made the house obey a human choice. Her thumbs brushed my cheeks, cool and trembling. That means something, she whispered. It means you mean something. My throat closed. So what now? Seraphine's gaze softened with unbearable sadness. Now you go live, she said. And I go become. I stared at her. Become what? Seraphine's lips curved faintly. Not a bride. Not a prisoner. She released me and stepped backward, fog curling around her black dress. I'll find you, she said, voice steady now. When the world is safe enough for me to stand in it without chains. The manor behind her cracked again, and the front steps trembled. Seraphine turned, running back toward the collapsing building, not out of loyalty but out of strategy, like she meant to ensure the last of the house's claim died with its walls. I wanted to follow. But my legs moved the other direction. Because sometimes survival is the cruelest kind of obedience. I ran through the gates as the iron groaned and bent, warping like heated metal. The fog broke apart. The road reappeared. My car sat where I'd left it, ordinary and ridiculous. Behind me, Valancourt made a sound like an exhale. Then silence. No explosion. No fire. Just absence. When I turned, there was no manor. Only trees. Only moonlight. Only a patch of ground that looked like it had never held a building at all. I stood there shaking until dawn painted the horizon pale. When sunlight finally hit my skin, it felt real in a way that made my eyes sting. I drove home with my sleeves soaked in my own blood, and for the first time, the taste of coffee later that day had flavor. Weeks passed. The vine mark on my wrist did not return. The crescent scars remained, faint, almost elegant, as if the story insisted on leaving its signature. And some nights, when the city was quiet and the rain fell just right, I'd catch the smell of roses on wet stone. Not behind me. Beside me. Like someone walking just out of sight, patient, waiting for the world to become safe enough to step into the light. And in those moments I didn't feel haunted. I felt promised, because I had attended a vampire wedding by accident. And I had left it with my life. But the real ending, the one Seraphine was writing now, wasn't a wedding. It was freedom.
This story you just heard is imagined and written entirely by me. What unfolded tonight was only the beginning, just the first glimpse into a world that hides its secrets behind silence, ceremony, and shadows. Some movements are meant to feel unfinished, not because they are weak, but because they are alive. What happened at that vampire wedding was not a complete answer. It was an invitation, an opening door, a warning, maybe, or a promise. As the night deepened, I realized that not every danger announces itself, and not every connection is meant to be understood right away. Some bonds form without words, some choices are made with a single step forward, and some encounters stay with you long after the music fades. There is more beneath the surface of that strange celebration, more meaning behind that unexpected dance, and more consequences waiting beyond the soft light and watchful eyes. If you felt that quiet tension, that slow pull of curiosity, then you're already then you are already part of this journey.